I've come out here has been beautiful weather. And that's quite a few times, and so very fortunate to be able to say that. Although I must also say that you folks really know how to do fog out here. So I did run into some fog driving out here such as I haven't seen in about 30 years since I was driving around the Delmarva Peninsula in the middle of the summer near the water. It's the kind of fog you expect a monster to walk out of. But no monster walked out, and fog is gone, and here we are. I'm speaking this morning on the topic of the creative process. And the most important thing you have to realize about the creative process is that it simply is. It's going on all of the time. Now, you didn't start it, and you can't stop it. Like President Lyndon B. Johnson said when talking about the Vietnam War, he said, "I feel like a hitchhiker on a Texas highway in a hailstorm. I can't run, I can't hide, I can't make it go away." Now, actually, we're in much better shape than the hitchhiker, because although we can't run, we can't hide, and we can't make it stop, we can understand the creative process and use it in a way that benefits rather than harms us. And go try that with a hailstorm. And so we're using the creative process all the time because we can't help but use it all of the time, because we're spirit forever coming into expression. And because of this, our thought reflects the creative process and has the quality of being creative. Now, what we think consciously become subconscious patterns that determine our experience. And then there's a primary substance upon which thought and feeling acts, and as a result of this, we have form. Now, your world, my world, is the result of this action that's been taking place as long as we've been around. Now, most of the time it goes on unconsciously until we come across a teaching like this and become aware of it and start paying attention to it, and then it goes on consciously as we understand this and use it. Now, this is what we mean when we say that our consciousness determines our experience. It's the reason for things so varied as Jesus performing what people called miracles and that little boy getting his bicycle in the movie The Secret. You remember The Secret? Well, of course you do, even though it's so last decade. The film is so last decade. And in fact, it's the reason for whatever happened to you and I last week, and it's the reason for whatever will happen to you and I when we leave here today. Now, since we can't run, can't hide, and can't make the creative process go away, the important thing is what we're doing with it, what we're going to do with it. Are we using it to create fulfilled lives for ourselves, or to create frustrated ones? Now, one of the things we try to do in this kind of teaching is to make you a little bit uncomfortable. And you thought you were coming here to become comfortable. I have some news for you. Well, in a sense, you do come here to become comfortable, but you also come here to become uncomfortable. Now, we do this so that you're always reaching out and always becoming something new. Now, one way to see why this is so important is to think about the oyster. I've told this story here before. Exactly 3 years ago, and it made me start to think that starting to happen to me here, what happens to me all the time when I speak in the center where I minister. I'll think of an analogy or a story. This is a great analogy, a great story. I want to use that this Sunday. But I'll think, well, wait a minute, I just used this about 3 months ago. Can't use it again so soon. So then I'll go and I'll use the wonderful miracle search software that searches everything on my computer, and I'll see, well, wait, I didn't tell this story 3 months ago, I told it 3 years ago, or 6 years ago, or 10 years ago. But I like this example. Think about the oyster. Oysters create beautiful natural pearls. And the formation of the natural pearl begins when a foreign substance slips into the oyster between its mantle and shell, irritating the mantle. The oyster's natural reaction is to cover up the irritant to protect itself. And the mantle covers the irritant with layers of the same substance that's used to create the shell. And this eventually forms a pearl. So from what starts out as an irritation comes something new and beautiful. And so it is with us. This little uncomfortability in our mind causes us to respond to what Dr. Ernest Holmes called the divine urge, which is the inner desire to express life, the desire to do and accomplish more, to be more completely happy, prosperous, and well. In his Science of Mind textbook, he writes, "We are surrounded by a spirit of living intelligence and eternal givingness, love, goodness, and power that wishes to express itself through us. There is a divine urge within, ever pushing us forward to the goal. We are also surrounded by an immutable law of cause and effect, and because of our divine individuality and the necessity of experience in order to come to a realization of what and who we are subject to the causes which we have set in motion. All is love, and yet all is law. Both love and law are perfect, and we as individuals can experience only what we really believe and act upon." And so what this all means is that the only thing that needs changing in our lives is us. You say, well, we want to change this, or we want to change that, and we want to change the other thing, when really the only thing that needs changing is us, and then all those other things will change in turn. So the question becomes, what can I do to change myself? And it doesn't have to be some kind of monumental, earth-shaking change. People think there has to be this monumental, dramatic, earth-shaking change, because self-change can also come in quiet ways. In quiet ways, in little quiet ways, and it can come in all sorts of different ways. For example, various sacred scriptures throughout history have helped people. Now, they've helped people because there have been some people who've actually read them. Believe it or not, there's some people who actually read them instead of talking about reading them or talking about what they might mean. Or they've sat down and they read them. And as the result of reading them, they changed their thought. This is how this happened. They read these things and it changed their thought. These writings made people think something other than what they had been thinking. Now, whatever way we do it, and reading Scripture certainly isn't the only way. What we want to do is to gain a sense that there's something greater than we are, yet we are it made visible, we are it in expression. In fact, that it is an action through us and in us, and when we direct it, then it's going to act for us. Well, then we ask ourselves what we need to do to grasp a new idea mentally and emotionally and then follow through on that new idea. Now, a problem is that we're often trying to get things, situations, and ideas that we don't really believe we can have. And we reveal that we don't really believe we can have them through the way that we talk about them. For example, somebody will say, well, I'd like a better job, but the way things are in my field, I probably won't get it. They used to say because the economy is so bad. But since the economy isn't bad anymore, now they have to say, well, my particular field is bad, and that's why they can't get it. And if they say that, then they certainly won't. Like Henry Ford said, whether you believe you can do a thing or not, you are right. Or something like that. And I say, well, something like that, because there are different versions of the quote floating around. Some say he said it this way, some say he said it that way, some say he didn't say it at all. I saw a whole page of different people this is attributed to. And actually, people have been saying it for over 2,000 years, since Virgil wrote something very similar in the Aeneid. Whoever said it is true. Or somebody will say, well, I'd like better health, but at my age, what can you expect? You have to have a little pain or a little pain there. Well, you don't have to have those little pains, but this individual has actually decreed it for him or herself, and therefore will certainly get it. Now, the world is going to help us with these misconceptions because the world says, don't bother. Don't bother with any of this. The world will tell us that a certain field is doing badly, and there's no point in even looking for a better job or any job at all. And the world will tell us that at a certain age, it's time to start looking for all kinds of aches and pains. But we don't have to pay any attention to any of that. We can have better experience of life when we decide within ourselves to change so that we can have it. When we change in ways that enable us to reach out mentally and emotionally to grasp it, to make it ours. Well, what can we do to make the creative process work for us in the ways that we want? Well, first, get a recognition, a sense of the goodness of life and of what's out there that's always available to us. And then expand your interests and get some new ideas, because new ideas are really the raw material of the creative process. Ideas are the raw material of the creative process. And please don't say you're too busy. Everybody always says they're too busy to do this, too busy to do that. But if you look at what people really do, they always seem to find the time to do the things that they really want to do. Now, these may not be the things they say they want to do. They may not be the things that they're supposed to be doing or should be doing, but they'll always find time to do the things they want to do. So become interested in this and make the time to find these ideas and get these new interests. Well, where do we get them? Actually, we get them from all over. From all over, because great new ideas are everywhere, but we're just not paying any attention to them. They're there, and they're available, but we're not paying attention to them. For example, have you looked at your bookshelf lately? The bookshelf in your house. There are probably books sitting there that you haven't thought about in years, much less read or used or studied. Books with new ideas that are just sitting there patiently waiting for you. And this happens to me all the time. I look at my bookshelf and find all sorts of things. And never mind the attic. I'm not talking about the attic now. Now I'm just talking about the shelves around me that I don't have to make any effort to go look at. So I look at it and find all sorts of things I'd forgotten I even had. And these are all sources of new ideas that are just waiting there for me. Back in, I think, 1991, Barry Farber, now I'm dating myself. He was a talk show host and a linguist and a writer. He wrote a wonderful book called Learn Any Language. And in the introduction to the book, he said, if you use this book, you can learn a new language. But if you don't use the book, it'll sit on the shelf and mock you. And I always thought of that, and now I think of it when I'm looking at all these books, they're mocking me because I'm not using them. But they're sitting there with the ideas. And that's exactly the point, that every idea we need and every idea we want is available to us, but we have to reach out and grasp it, or it's just going to wait and wait and wait. Now, ideas are fresh, creative, and valuable, fresh, creative, and available right where you are at every instant of time, at any point in space. Now, at the same time, there's your subconscious mind sitting there, resisting change, resisting these new ideas. And then when you start to introduce these new ideas, it'll bring up all the fears, all the reasons why you can't do something. And it'll do this because until changed, it'll produce on the basis of what's already in there. Now, we change that by putting in new ideas. So, if we want a better experience of life, it can't be based on past limited patterns. Because our minds want to stay the way they are, and they will unless we break those patterns and put in something new. For example, if we dwell on all of the humdrum thinking and activities of the past week, or on the hard work at the office or at home, or whatever other problems we've had, and we think about this and dwell on it, then the subconscious mind says, okay, you're thinking so much about it that you must want more of it. This is what you're thinking about all the time. It means you must want more of it, and so I'll produce more. And so more of that is produced. Now, the creative process is always in action making things new. And this is always going on in nature. Trees make new leaves every year. A tree might be 100 years old. It doesn't matter. It still makes new leaves each year. And so think about that the next time you want to use the excuse, oh, I'm too old to do this or that. If the 100-year-old tree can make new leaves, then we can do something new, no matter what age we are. And so do what you can to get a new thought going on in your mind. And be like the oyster. Allow that wonderful little irritation in your soul to lead to the creation of something that's new and beautiful. And so ends the lesson.